Hey, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see everyone. Good to see everyone made it again this week. We uh, we hopefully have a couple new viewers out there tonight from Pennsylvania. We say hello to them when they get on. Let's see. Our subject tonight is the parable of the sheep and the goats. So if you want to sit back, enjoy the beginning of the Sabbath. It's just starting here. So if you would take us out, Dr. Ricks.
Okay. By the way, that's our Big Ben clock you hear in the background. It's doing its Big Ben thing, so let's kind of ignore it. Okay. This is one of my old favorites. It's called Sleeping in the Barn. A lawyer and two friends, a rabbi and a holy man from the East, had car trouble in the countryside, so they were asked to spend the night with a farmer. They pulled up and they walked to the farmer's house, and the farmer said, "There might be a problem. You see, I have a room for two to sleep, but we couldn't possibly get three. One of you will have to sleep in the barn." Well, the rabbi says, "Well, you know, I'll be a big man. Our folks wandered in the desert for 40 years. I'm humble enough. I'll sleep in the barn this evening." The rabbi goes out to the barn, beds down. A few moments later, he knocks on the farmer's door. The rabbi stood there. "What's wrong?" the farmer asked. "Well, I'm grateful to you, but I can't sleep in the barn. You see, my faith doesn't allow me to sleep with unclean animals, and there's a pig in the barn." So, the friend from the Eastern religion says, "Well, I'll swap places with you." He goes to the barn, sleeps for a few minutes, and then the farmer lays down. Then suddenly, "What's wrong?" said the farmer. The man from the Eastern holy man said, "Well, I too am grateful for your helping us out, but there is a cow in the barn, and in our faith, cows are considered sacred. I can't possibly sleep on holy ground." After some complaining and grumbling, the lawyer says, "Okay, I'll go out to the barn." So the lawyer goes out to the barn. He beds down. The farmer says, "Oh, what is it now?" She opens the door, and there stood the pig and the cow. One more short joke. When is a door not a door? A door is not a door when it's ajar. Now, let's say hello to Carolyn and Bill Birch that are out there listening, and the things are going well for them, especially Carolyn and her adventures with the hospitals, but keep praying for her. She's doing better. On the news of the day, this is a minor item, maybe minor. Congress has passed a bill, and there'll be less data collection and surveillance on us regular folks. They won't be collecting our phone records unless a court says there's a reason that they should be investigating us. So I think that's a victory.
That was the best joke yet, actually. I really don't believe that. I don't buy that for a minute, but okay.
They say, "Well, only look at your records if we need to look at them." I don't know.
Right.
I guess that's a good deal.
Right.
This Duggar family thing, I was watching the guy who does the media analysis on Fox News. The most important thing about the Duggar thing is it shows the deep split in the American media and in the American people. For instance, if someone who's a conservative Christian makes any mistake, even minor stuff, minor teenager with other minor teenagers, the media pounces on it like it's the worst scandal in history. If a conservative makes any mistake, they will go out to destroy him. I mean, media. And Christians, in other words, progressives really loves pounding on anyone who's a Christian. And of course, conservatives don't trust progressives. So America is divided. And according to the man who did the analysis, he says, we've been divided before, but never divided to this level of anger and emotion, progressives versus conservatives. For instance, if you're a progressive, you could wipe your server clean to hide documents. The media would just hide the story. You could smash the IRS big chief on the tax spy thing. They smashed her computer, so no one can ever get any data, and the media never touched the story. And this division in America, I think, is deep and strong.
Yeah, you've got to divide to conquer, and a house divided amongst itself will not stand. And our country has never been more divided ever. It started probably in the late 40s and continued on. The 60s was a huge revolution, and those people in the 60s, those teenagers in the 60s with the love-ins and the drug-ins and everything else, are now running our Congress and our Senate and our states and our large corporations and on and on and on. So it kind of stinks in every corner.
Yep.
Yep. If you remember the whatever that guy was, he said, turn on, turn off, drop out, whatever it was. Well, the people that did all of those things are now, they're the people with a pen in their hand making laws and writing contracts and everything else. So
all the people that said back then, this will be the ruin of this country, were right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, I remember Rush Limbaugh saying, when the current president was elected, he said, we all think this will produce more racial harmony, but he says, it will actually produce more racial division. And I had a feeling that Rush was right. I'm not sure why. I said the feeling he was right. It would appear now that he was right. Also, just speaking of division, when Jerusalem was under siege in 70 A.D., the Jewish people were very divided. You'll see Paul, I think it's in Acts 24, exploit that division. The Jewish people were so divided between the Pharisees and the Sadducees and some of their supporters. What happened is they would fight the Romans on the wall during the day. Then at night they'd fight among themselves, which only made things worse for them. America is moving. The big media, of course, is part of the problem. But Hollywood, by the way, is also on the far left. Here's something I heard just interesting. A guy on radio was analyzing the movie about the Titanic. And if I understand him correctly, the big theme of the Titanic was class warfare, because that's part of socialist progressive dividing the classes. Class warfare was a big theme of the movie. So they made the co-captain out to be a greedy, bribe-taking, villain. But in real life, in previous movies and in history books, he was actually one of the heroes. And one of the other captains that saved 700 people was another hero. He was completely left out of the movie. Most of the leading men with honor let other people get in the lifeboats. And there was a lot of honor and positive things, even among rich, powerful people. But Hollywood sponged all that out of the movie to push class warfare.
Yeah, in most of these movies, you see there's a cartoon for children called Ice Age that came out a few years ago, and they had a TV commercial on the other day with all the characters from this, and they were sliding in the ice and playing or whatever, and it was two male characters, and it says it doesn't matter who you are, nobody's perfect, you can adopt children. And it was two male cartoon characters that were adopting a child together. So it's at every level. They're trying to get our children from the earliest they can with all these things. And our kids can't process anymore. They don't say, if I do this, this is the end result. They just do it now. And that's how you end up addicted to something. That's how you end up pregnant. That's how you end up, unfortunately, in some cases, killing a child. because before you were held responsible for what you did. You know, you're going to marry that girl, and you're going to work your tail off, and all your hopes and dreams of being a whatever might have just changed because you got a baby to feed now. But nobody takes any responsibility. There's no second step is ever taught anymore in our country. And I'm seeing people, I've had black and white come in my store that totally agree with me on this. And I'm seeing some things online, people that you would think would be way behind some of these progressive moves. The rapper Ice-T said that what the country's doing is they're making wimps, and it's real masculinity has disappeared in our country. Mm-hmm. So this is a guy you would think, you know, because of his career and stuff, that he would be way behind Hollywood, but he wasn't. I was pretty taken back.
That's interesting.
Yep. There was a cartoon on the, I forget what thing it was, but it was like a circus tent, and it was like a freak show, and on the sign outside the tent said, you know, conservative, you know, has job, you know, come see the freaks, you know, and you know all this sort of stuff that, you know, we would kind of how we would consider ourselves, you know, Christian, believes in God, you know, come see the freaks. And that's the whole mess that they're doing. Is the whole of the American people are being played. We're being divided. We're being controlled. It's all about control, and that's exactly what they're doing. And the people that fall for the, you know, us versus them and all this kind of stuff are being controlled. It gives, when you think one side is good and one side, I mean, it gives you a, you know, there's hope that we can pull this out and all. We're still being controlled.
Yeah.
Because neither side is. Both sides are still working both sides are working for the same ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
90% of them are all working for the same ends, but they got us working with each other, allowing them to do what they're doing.
Right. Now, I've noticed a trend lately. It may have been going on for a while, but I just started seeing it. That you now have a lot of conservative, or supposed to be conservative, news blips, like come on Facebook, and people will post it and they'll share it. And what it is, they'll put a provocative headline up, and they use keywords like Obama caught in crooked act again. And so people will start passing that around, and if you actually go in and read the article, it has nothing to do with the headline whatsoever. Right. But most people won't even read the article. They just look at that headline and they start sharing it, and so next thing you know, everybody's talking about all this crooked stuff that happened, and the story's not even true. And so it's happening on both sides. You got the liberal media who's doing things. They've got this, and I don't know if it's truly conservative or if it's liberals who are acting like conservative media outlets, but people are jumping on it because it plays to what their opinion is, but it's false information.
By the way, there's a study, and I forgot the Jewish guy's name. It'll come to me later. Who wrote a famous book on media bias. He says that millennials, get 67% of their news off Facebook. He said that is shocking. There's no way you're going to get balanced news. And then you wonder why people are so out of it. They don't know what's going on in the world. They're getting, at least younger people, are getting most of their news from Facebook. Whatever their friends pass along.
And it's not really anything new, because I remember back several years ago, there was a guy I worked with. He brought in a petition that his church was passing around because that the FCC was trying to pass laws to remove religious programming off TV. Like I think at that time it was Saved by an Angel or something. And anyway, it got my curiosity up, so I did a little bit of research into it, and I found out that this was a twist on a false story that had been circulating for years, and it keeps coming back, of Madeleine O'Hare trying to get the FCC to pass a law to get religious programming taken off TV. And the truth of it is, there was never, ever any movement to try to get religious programming taken off TV. It was a story that got started, and it's associated with her name because she was a famous atheist. But the FCC actually had to create an office just to handle the phone calls and stuff from the false rumors. And no matter how hard they tried, they could never put that to rest. And even now, it keeps cropping back up. I'll see stuff posted on Facebook now where FCC is trying to do this, or FCC, and it's just absolutely not true. But people take it and they pass it around as truth. And I've seen more and more on Facebook people doing it, and it's people who really shouldn't be doing it because we know better than to gossip and pass false lies, but we grab that headline without checking into it, and we pass it on. And if I do it and I pass it on to Ken, and Ken's like, oh, well, Kelly knows what he's talking about. He wouldn't pass something on false. And then he passes it on without checking into it, and now you've got this lie passing on and on and on. And that's what people believe as news and information.
You think about them. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I know you do. Kelly, you're pretty diligent about checking stuff before you just throw it out there, and so am I. I read lots of stuff. I see a nice headline, I'll read down through it, and it's not what the headline says. Even though the headline would support or something my position, it didn't fit. So I don't share it. Something may get by me. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but I read through this stuff. If you're informed, I guess what we're saying here, if you're informed and you take the time and do the work, you won't be controlled. You might be a victim of what happens around you, but mentally you won't be sucked in, and you won't be pulled in by it, and you won't be staunch on this side or the other side, causing part of the problem, which is getting us at each other's throat.
And I was thinking, part of what you do when you want to be a dictator and control people, like Pravda and the Nazis, is you dumb people down and you feed them unbalanced propaganda. Well, maybe we're not quite totally at that stage, but if you get most of your news from Facebook, you're getting unbalanced diet, a lot of weird conspiracy theories and things that are just not balanced in the way of news. And I think, plus, I heard a young lady say this being interviewed. I assume she was telling the truth. Whatever school she was from, she said they had only a minimum of history. They knew nothing about, very little about American history, and they spent a lot of time with politically correct stuff. And I think she was telling the truth. They are dumbing people down.
Right.
I was
An informed, intelligent population cannot be controlled.
I was talking to a school teacher. This is 10 years ago now, I guess, and she, I said something about Sam Houston, because I don't know who that is. I said, "You've never heard of Houston, Texas?" She goes, "I don't know who he was either." And she said, "It's Black History Month, and that's what we're studying." And she was a school teacher and in school to become a therapist.
It's insane how much they don't know. What goes along with if as an American citizen, if you're informed and you are educated, you cannot be controlled. Same goes with the Bible. If you are informed, you're educated about the Bible, you can't be fooled by people who are going to try and come in, and wolves come in and drag you out of the church or drag you into other beliefs. If you're educated and you're informed and you're studied, it won't happen to you.
That's scripture.
That's a good segue to go into our topic, which is the parable of the sheep and the goats.
I try.
And I thought one way to segue into that, Matthew 24 and 25 are one presentation that Christ gave. So if you want to understand Matthew 25, you look at what Christ warned about in Matthew 24. In Matthew 24 from 44 to 51, Christ basically said, be always ready, because he's most likely going to return when people, or at least most people, don't expect it. So be ever vigilant when it comes to the return of Jesus Christ. And then he gives three specific warnings in Matthew 25. We're going to put, of course, most of our focus on the third one, parable of the sheep and the goats. But the first one, Matthew 25, is the parable of the 10 virgins. And that parable, they're put into two categories, the foolish and the wise. The foolish virgins have no extra oil, no reserve oil. They're just barely enough oil to stay alive, just barely. They're doing the minimum, if that, as servants of Christ. So we're warned against doing the minimum. We're to stay spiritually awake and avoid being lulled to sleep.
Yeah, I think actually Ken made a statement earlier that jumped out at me when he said that, in reading news articles and things, you have to put in the work and the time to make sure and read and know what it's about and what's going on. And I think that fits right into this, is that you have to put in the time. You can't just cruise or coast. You have to put in the time studying God's Word and putting it into practice. And I think the danger of, as we go on, especially if you've been in the church any time at all, we tend to, I think, get tired and lose our enthusiasm and, just kind of begin to sit and wait for Christ's return. And in that sitting, waiting, we're not really doing what we need to do to make sure we're doing the work when Christ returns. And we're not caught just doing nothing.
I like that term, coasting. Coasting, on your former laurels. And the way that parable is set up, they get an announcement that he's on his way. Certain prophetic events might snap into place, and it's coming soon. But the way the parable is set up, only the ones that have a certain amount of reserve are able to be ready when Christ gets there. The rest don't have enough time to get ready.
Yeah, I think also that if it's a little bit like crying wolf. We see things occur, and so many times people start looking at, well, this is the end, and then the end doesn't occur, and so then they, relax a little bit and kind of fall back into doing things that they shouldn't be doing and not doing what they should be doing, and then we see a few things happen again, and you see everybody come and they go, well, is this the end? And people get energized again, and then they slowly, and to the point where they'll say, oh, is this the end? Nah, that's not the end. And they don't even try anymore.
Something else, though, is people need to have regular attendance at church. And a lot of our people don't have a church necessarily close by. But regular attendance, I get in there and we talk about what's going on around us in a way that we can't talk with people, coworkers or whatever, about. They look at you like you have two heads. And we go to church. I can't wait to get there tomorrow because I know that Frank is going to be, and his daughter are going to just be bombarding me with information and stuff they've studied, and we talk about, and the conversation is edifying and it's uplifting, and we go back and forth, and there's good camaraderie. We pick at each other a little bit, but he's retired and he's a really smart guy, and he has time to really research things and study things, and they will tell me things that I haven't seen and haven't heard, and when I go looking into it, there it is.
Yeah, I think sometimes people forget that, we talk about observing the Sabbath. We're Sabbath keepers, and I go to church and stuff, but I know people who will say, but all you're going to do is play a DVD. I can stay at home and watch a DVD.
Man, they asked me to play DVDs and not talk. If you got a GTA DVD and you got me, come on.
Yeah, but I think the thing that people are missing who take that attitude of, I can watch a DVD at home, they're missing a key component to Sabbath service, and that's the fellowship. You can't stay at home and watch a DVD and get fellowship. And I think that, to me, if you are not getting fellowship, I think you need to look at it and understand that I don't believe you're truly keeping the Sabbath. Just by watching a sermon DVD, now I know that some people have no other choice, and that's their situation. But those who have a choice and say, well, I'm just going to stay home because I can watch a DVD at home rather than go to church, part of the command is to go and to fellowship and to assemble. And if you don't do that, then you're not truly keeping the Sabbath.
Hebrews 10:24, if I can throw a scripture out here. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some did, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, all the more as we see the day approach. We should be more likely to be at services in the holy days now than ever before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would also argue that watching a DVD in a structured environment, like, say, 10 people watching a tape, where you have to sing a song or two and then you have to sit quietly and watch it, maybe take notes, is 150 times more impact than watching it at home in your easy chair. You're going to get a lot more out of it in that environment.
Well, then afterwards we discuss it. We go, what do you think? Well, one of yours, Dr. Rick said this. How do you think about that? Well, Stan said that. What do you think? I like this. I never put that together. We sit around and discuss it and bounce it off of each other, and then somebody will come up with a scripture like I just did, and they'll actually add to it, and it makes it even better. So it's okay to watch a DVD as long as you use it. You know, you take that information, you use it with each other, and you run with it, and that's what we do. I'm real happy with our group down here. I look forward always to seeing them.
Because I think that warning is stay spiritually awake and avoid being lulled to sleep. Because you're going to need more spiritual oil than you think you will. And that's what I take out of Matthew 25, verse 6 and 10. And the second warning in Matthew 25, the second parable, is the parable of the talents. And the parable of the talents is a warning built around investing the talents and gifts God has given you and making them grow over time. And of course, it's used in a money sense, like talents of gold or something for their master. But obviously, he's pleased with those people who have a certain amount of talents and they increase it and they're rewarded accordingly. But the man with the least talent, what does he do? He hides his talents out of fear and shame. He's afraid of failure. Do you realize being afraid of failure can immobilize you?
Yeah. Yeah, it can cause you to freeze and not do something you really know you should, but you're afraid to, and so it's easier to stay put or stop than it is to move forward.
Right. People get tunnel vision and fear. And, physically, they literally get tunnel vision and fear. And you have to sit down and say, who am I? What am I? I'm supposed to be a light to the world. And I'm not a light to the world if I keep my mouth shut. I just go to work and come home and sit in my house. You got to be actively doing when Christ returns. And that means praying, studying, fasting, whatever. But it also means attending services and stirring up each other and discussing it and making it your spiritual family, which has got to be more important than the physical family.
Yes, I agree.
I've got family that I love dearly that won't have anything to do with the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that fear which locks people up in doing nothing because they're afraid. And even in a technical sense, most of the time, at least under normal circumstances, a dollar devalues 2 to 3% every year. So if you hit it for a couple years in the ground, you've actually lost your owner's money.
Right.
It used to be put in the bank, he would have gotten the standard 2 or 3% interest under normal circumstances. Right now, we got some financial problems in the world. The only place you can get any increase is the stock market, but that's kind of an anomaly. That's not the normal thing. And I think we have to be worried about being ashamed of Christ. I was listening to the radio again. There were 3 people in an office, and they were ashamed to say anything about Christianity or Christian beliefs because of I guess, certain people in the office, so they whispered. Something about that doesn't sound right, does it?
Well, I'd say I work for myself, so I say what I want. And if they don't like it, I've got 2 back doors and a front door. I can help them leave. I'm putting stuff on my back walls, the 10 Commandments and things like that, where the kids go to leave their shoes and things. And I told them, I said, we don't have a school creed. So just every day when you come in for your class, read a couple of those. They're good for you. And all the parents are applauding me. They're really happy about it. So it's the media, because it's like the whole race thing. I don't know any black folk that hate me. I don't hate them. It's all the media, and it's pitting. They're trying to pit everybody against everybody on race, on male female, on sexual orientation, on money. Who's got more money? He's somehow worse than me because he was able to accomplish more than me. It's silliness, and it's nonstop. And the ill-informed will fall into those categories, and the people who are not close to God will fall into those categories, because it's easy to blame somebody else.
See, if you don't ever take a stand, then you just move to and fro with whatever's going on, and there is no friction because everything's okay and everybody's opinion's good. But the moment you have a foundation or you take a stand, you immediately go against the grain of what's going on today, and that's the thing with, if you have a religious belief, especially if you're a Christian, then there's things that are out there that's going on that we believe are wrong. And so you're going to say that's not right, or you're going to take a stand, and the moment you do that, you become an enemy of everybody else because you are hateful. Because if you're taking a stand, you're taking an opposite view of somebody, and you're saying, well, what you're doing is wrong, or that's not good, and so therefore you're the one that's the problem because you're intolerant.
Well, I blame the churches. The preachers are not teaching people just the basics. When this guy gets in the office, says, I'm a Christian, and he is pro all this sexual bizarro stuff, and he is pro abortion, and there's not one Christian thing happening, but people claiming to be Christian voted for him because their pastors aren't teaching them. Those are the signs of not Christian. Those are the signs of demonism and evil. And so he's got these people who go to church on Sunday, wear great big crosses, and go and vote for him and think he's doing a great job.
By the way, a very famous Christian who lives in a big city that you all already mentioned with thousands of parishioners. So I'm told by several people who supposed to know, he said that the Apostle Paul was indelicate, brash, and inappropriately in Romans 1 labeled certain activities sins. I thought, wow. I mean, and this is a Christian minister.
A man claiming to be a Christian minister.
And he is
exactly.
And he's saying that the man who wrote the New Testament, or most of it, was wrong. Now you think about that statement for a bit.
Yeah, he may have to look at him someday.
It's not a question of saying we don't like the translation. I could see you could play with that a little bit, but he didn't say that.
Right. I had dinner a couple months ago, and there was a preacher there, and for whatever reason, he wanted to sit next to me. And so I said, what are you going to do when they start telling you that by law you have to perform homosexual marriage? And he goes, I don't know. And he got real uncomfortable. Well, the man sitting across from me goes, I blame the churches. I blame the priest. He got real impassioned. He said, that behavior is not welcome in our church. He says, if you have that problem and you come to us and say, I want to change, we will counsel you and try to help you. But if you think you're going to continue in that behavior, we're going to ask you not to attend. And I said, yeah, me too. And so he says, well, how long do you give them? And I said, 8 minutes. And everybody laughed. I was just trying to make light of the situation. Well, he didn't like that at all. He got up and left. A couple people liked it and laughed, but he took it personal.
By the way,
maybe he's.
There's 2 scriptures I just want to throw in here. Let's go on what you're saying, Dave. 2 Timothy 1:8, Christ warns against being ashamed of him in the gospel. And this is the one that's most shocking, Revelation 21:8. If you read Revelation 21:8, I think most surprising, God says he does not want cowards or the fearful, but some translations do translate a coward. He does not want cowards or the fearful. And he lists them with people like pimps and other really terrible sinners. Cowards are listed with them. God expects us to have a certain amount of courage.
Yeah, you've got to be the guy that stands up. And I posted a picture on Facebook from back when Adolf Hitler was doing a speech, and everybody had their hand in the air, and there was one guy with his arms crossed just looking and kind of analyzing it. And on the bottom it said, be that guy. And that's who we have to be. We've got to be the guy that when the millions and millions or Sieg Heil or whatever they're going to do, we've got to be the one to go, I'm not doing that. And there will be consequences. Apparently, David Cameron apparently a couple weeks ago said something, I'm paraphrasing this, so I apologize if I don't get it right. But he said, you're not just going to love the New World Order. I mean, not just going to obey the New World Order. That's not enough. You will love it. And so it isn't good enough just to follow the law. You're going to love obeying the law. They're not going to like people like us.
Yeah. which I think gets back to the importance of fellowshipping with one another to gain that strength, so that when these things occur, we will be able to, overcome. Because if you're not up to snuff, if your lamp's not full, then you're not going to make it through it, because you will fail, because you will get caught up in it and just swallowed whole with everything else that's going on in the world. And it's easy to say, no, I'm not going to do that, but if you're not prepared, you will.
Well, the
Fear will
scripture
take over.
says nation will rise against nation. That's the same word for nationality. And it says brother shall turn on brother, however that says. That may be spiritual brothers. It might be somebody we go to church with that we love dearly and we look at as family, because we don't know what's going on in their personal life. We don't know how their relationship is with God. And we just see them at services or at the feast or whatever, and you love them to death. And when it really gets bad, they may point at you.
Mm-hmm.
Fear does some terrible things.
Yeah.
Ken, would you all like to look at the parable of the sheep, which is the third warning and the main thing for this particular one?
Certainly. When Christ returns in glory, he's going to separate people into two groups, the sheep and the goats. And the first group is the sheep, and it talks about that they were welcome because they were kind and helpful in the following manner. And the following manner is there's six things that the people who are considered sheep and are considered Christ that they do. And one is, I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty and you gave me drink, homeless and you gave me a room, shivering and you gave me clothes, sick and you stopped and visited me, and I was in prison and you came to me. All examples of helping each other and helping people that are in need, whether anybody sees it or not, whether you get anything from it or not, just because it's in your heart and that's what you should do. He explains that the least of them, that we serve the least of them when we serve the least of his people, we serve him, and the people of this earth. Let's see. Exodus 22:22. I can read that real quick here. Well, kind of quick. All right. 22:22 Exodus says, "You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child." We should support the people that need our help, and we should do it lovingly, and we should do it without wanting any reward to it. It just should be natural.
Well, also, we should do that if you physically can do that. If you can hand them some money to help them or whatever, but you should also be there for them emotionally when they.
That's what I was going to say. Just listening to people sometimes.
Right. We got a fellow that's calling. He's going through tough times, and he called me today for no reason other than he just wanted somebody to talk to. We didn't talk about any of his problems. But, we got off the phone with him because I couldn't talk with him. I was at work, so I called him back when I got home. And I said to my wife, "Do you know why he called me?" She said, "Just to hear your voice." And I said, "That's about it. Just to hear somebody that he knows really does care." And I've been in the position he's in, and it's a heartbreaking position, but it's in today's world, it's what you got to deal with sometimes. And but we as Christians have got to be. I'll talk a lot, like if we're in a room together or whatever. You can't shut me up sometimes. But on the phone, for whatever reason, you know that, huh? On the phone, for some reason, I try to be a good listener. A lot of times people go, "Are you still there?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm listening. I'm giving you your time to work through this." I don't want to hear the sad sack stories. I really don't. But at the same time, I understand them because I've had some of the same kind of things he's going through happen to me. And I know that I needed somebody to talk to listen. And
That's a good point. Sometimes we don't appreciate that the things we're going through someday is going to be an education that we can pass on to someone else. Yes, I did the same thing. Yes, believe it or not, I did that. I was worse, down the road. So here's how I got back. Maybe this can help you. So when we're going through these times, tough trials that seem like, people look up and holler, "Why me, Lord?" Here's the reason. The reason is someday that may come back, and you may be able to pick someone up out of the weeds and get them on their feet because you had the experience. You can handle it. He gave it to you because you could handle it. The person you're going to help maybe couldn't handle it. Plus, they're going to look to you and look to how you worship God and how you view the Bible, and this just goes along with the fact that you could help them. And one tip for young men, or mostly young men, when a woman brings you her problem, doesn't mean she's looking for you to fix it. Because that's the first thing guys want to do. Oh, a woman brought me a problem. How do I fix it? No, you can't fix it, most of them anyway. She just wants to tell you something.
Get it off her chest and ease her mind.
That's right. You don't have to go out and fix it. Just listen.
And the other thing, too, is I didn't know this guy when I went through some of the stuff he's going through. And now he watches the program, and he's told me today he can't wait. He's coming. He lives in another state. He's coming to visit, and he can't wait to go to church with us and see the people in our church because I've been so kind to him for so long. And I'm not being kind to him because I'm a really great guy. I like the guy. I like the guy. I enjoyed the time I spent with him. And but when unfortunately life's dealt him a pretty tough blow right now, and he's got to work through it. And but that's, as a Christian, you sit and you listen and you read scripture, because there are a lot of scriptures that are doom and gloom. I just read one a minute ago about the ones that don't obey. But at the same time, there's a lot of scriptures that are really encouraging and give you hope and faith. Read the Proverbs, read the Psalms. Some of those things you go, wow, God's really making promises. We read Hebrews 1. God's really making promises to me, big promises. A lot of times people in the world today, they get to a point, they go, why do I even want to go on? It's so tough. I can't find a job. Whatever it is. And you read some of that and you go, but you know what? I have to go through this, but I'm going to inherit a kingdom. I'm going to be part of God's actual family. I'm going to get to sit at a dinner table across from the apostles, King David, whoever, and I'm going to get to see the first man ever. I'm going to see Adam and know what he looked like, and draw him a picture of a caveman and say, "They said that was you." He's going to be like, "You got to kid me."
He's going to say, "That's you." And I was thinking, when you look at God's law defended the most vulnerable, the orphan and the widow.
And you never know when the sheep, there's another verse, I don't remember where it's at, that you never know when you're in the company of angels that are, maybe that's the person you're helping. You don't know it, and I think it kind of feeds into that same mindset, is you don't know who you're taking care of, but anytime you're doing this to others in your heart, you're also doing it to Christ. And I think we should think about that when people need things. And sometimes we should run to help when we can and give we're not looking to empty our wallets but we are looking to do for most of the time it's not money. Most of the time it can be other things. Like, more people need more emotional support many times in their lives than they need money, even if they're pretty broke. They need someone to help them get out of that, out of the mental, part of it. And they're not always looking for handouts.
Maybe they're thirsty for kindness.
You betcha. That's true.
A lot of times
they need a sympathetic ear is what they need.
A lot of times God calls people after hard times. It's like the Marines. They break you down to nothing and rebuild you a Marine. When sometimes God lets you get into some tough times, and those tough times actually could be a blessing, because he calls you. You're in his church, and he changes your entire life on every level forever, and then offers you the possibility to be part of his family for eternity, and offers you a kingdom. But he's got to break you down to a certain point. So sometimes when you hit those trials, you need to say to yourself, maybe this is a blessing that it don't look like one right now. But
that's one of the hardest verses to get around, is that you should be happy for your chastisement. I mean, that's paraphrasing, looking forward to testing, because the payoff is huge.
Right, and
it don't seem like that.
The other thing too is when God punishes you or allows these things to happen, he's acknowledging you. If you read Job 1, Satan comes to God, and God says, where have you been? He's not even mindful of you. You're nothing to me. But he's mindful of us. We're his children. There's not a minute that goes by that I don't think about my kids.
Yep.
By the way, I was thinking of the next part, the parable about the goats. The goats, obviously the sheep were the ones who took care of the least, those who needed it the most. But the goats were the opposite. When, as Christ said, when people were hungry, they didn't feed them any food. When they were thirsty, they didn't give them a drink. When they were homeless, they didn't give them a bed. When they were shivering, no clothes. When they were sick or in prison, they never visited them. And of course, naturally, the goats would insist, wait a minute, when did we see, you, Lord, and we didn't help you? They're the type of person that would always help beautiful personalities, people with power, money, or position. So of course they would have helped Christ or someone in the power position. These are people that are good at playing power politics, or experts at playing church politics. But they have little or no time for the ignored, overlooked little people of church. And that's the message that Christ has given us, is that, wait a minute, the people you should be nice to are the ignored, overlooked little people, because they're the ones that Christ insists, they're the ones that Christ identified with when it comes to help, just like with the orphans and the widows in the Old Testament.
Today I rode with this fellow, and he told me that he had gone into business with a guy, that he trusted the guy was real active in his church, and they did all this business on a handshake, and the business didn't work for whatever reason, and I guess he felt like he'd been conned. But he said that the guy told him he donated tens of thousands of dollars to the church, and that God and the church owed him for that. If you give to somebody because you want God to owe you a blessing, you ain't getting it. That ain't how that works. It's got to be out of your heart because you genuinely love God's children.
But that's how PR people are. A lot of companies do PR charity because they'll get paid back eventually, one way or the other. You help some powerful corporation or some political institution, they're going to pay you back eventually. So you're really not doing it out of charity, not in the godly sense of the word. And we have to remember that as Christians, help the person that really can't do you any favors. And actually, if you go to James chapter 2, verse 1 through 18, James, almost that entire part of the chapter is about favoritism in the church. You know how blunt James is. He says, wait a minute. Somebody comes in there and he's got poor rags on, and you treat him like he has poor rags on, and a guy with beautiful clothes comes in and you give him the best seat in the house. James says you're breaking the law because you're playing favoritism.
Yeah. I remember when I was first ordained as a minister, I was surprised at the people who, I didn't have a relationship with, or never really talked to or anything, and I knew who they were, but when I became ordained, all of a sudden they were like my best friends, and I remember thinking, I didn't understand that until later on, as I learned a few things, that there are people who are drawn to a title. If they don't care about you, won't have anything to do with you until you have a title, or they perceive that you have some kind of authority or power, and then they want to be your best bud, and they just act like that you've known each other forever. And I've just never have understood that. But it's the idea of that, I guess, the goats that, you can do something for me, or I want to rub shoulders with you because you're somebody, versus before you were a nobody. And it's really sad when you see that happen with people who are in God's church, but it does happen.
Yeah, I know a businessman here in town, and boy, he's a name dropper. He knows everybody and hugs them, and and he told me, he goes, you're gonna know this and this, and then he's naming all these politicians and stuff, and I really wasn't excited about it. I'm more excited about going to church and doing stuff with my business and my family. And he literally came and knocked on my door one day to try to get me to go with him to see the mayor. And I'm not a big fan of our mayor here, He's an arrogant multi-millionaire. He lives in a house that was built to be a country club, and then he bought it and turned it to a house. I mean, and he's just arrogant, and I just don't have time for that. I drive an old beat-up red pickup truck. I don't care about your Maserati or whatever. So yeah, that does happen. But
I'm sure you've seen the story of the news just here that the NFL getting government funds to have the patriotic halftime shows that they've been having, and here people are watching and thinking the NFL is so supportive of our military, and come to find out, no, they were getting money to put these shows on. There's no patriotism there, but yet that was the appearance that people had until this story came out. And that's kind of the same thing. People, it seems like one thing's going on until you find out the other thing. It had nothing to do with that they were patriotic or Christian or anything else. It was just they were getting something out of it.
Well, this last Super Bowl, the halftime show was a dedication to Satan. Go look that up and watch it. They were dancing around with tails and horns, and it was everything they could to. It was horrible. It was just horrible. So it's not as patriotic as they may try to play it off as.
Several of those have been. That one that Donna did was, I think, the worst one ever.
Yep, that's the one I'm talking about.
And it's a shame, but some people won't do anything if they don't get paid. That's a bad attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean. There's some things you should do out of Christian love. One final area we should cover, and that is we have to be cautious in the world we live in today, because the dangers of ambitious con men and the mentally unstable makes it a lot more dangerous to help people than it used to be. For instance, I know of at least several cases where this is the case, several. Someone would come into our church, stay there for a little while, and then start glumming off various church members to con them out of money and stuff. And they go from person to person. After a while, it caught up with them. Word gets out that you're more here for conning than you are for spiritual purposes. And then when somebody says, well, I don't think so, they get highly offended. And they say, you people don't have any love. Then they go join a whole nother church organization. They can con them for a year or two till he catches up with them.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a fella contact me a few months ago, said that he was, the nearest church to him was Detroit, and said he was going to be flying to Tampa, and he wanted somebody in church to pick him up and take him to their house overnight and help him to find a place or let him live with them. And I contacted Gary, and Gary said, I've never heard of that guy. And he said, be very cautious. So I sent him a message and said I just did not know what I could do for him. But he made it sound like he attended church in Detroit, and he asked if he could stay in my house. And I don't know who this guy is.
I would be real cautious about letting people stay in your house. I don't know why, but the world has just gotten to be, and the way the laws are, I would just be real cautious about letting people stay in your house. The Bible says you should be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Matthew 10:16. All I can say is you got to be a little more cautious, and it's sad to say that. Well, when I was young, you could pick up hitchhikers and all kinds of things. That's many, many, many years ago. Nowadays, if you did that kind of thing, you wouldn't live too long. before somebody hit you in the head and robbed you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is a more dangerous world that we live in, and it's unfortunate that that's the case.
Years ago, Sandy invited a lady she works with, who seems to be very sweet, over to the house for a cookout. And when they left, some of our stuff went with them. You know.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I was looking at Acts 20. This is Paul, the last time he'd see the Ephesian elders. It was one of heartfelt statements, and Paul was crying, and they're crying. But Acts 20, in verse 29, here's what Paul tells the Ephesian elders. I'm reading the NIV version, but the others are the same thing. Verse 28, keep watch over yourselves and all the flock which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. So he's telling them to take care of the people. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he bought with his own blood. Verse 29, this is the key verse. Verse 29, Acts 20. I know that after I leave, and that was going to be almost immediately Paul was leaving, savage wolves, he means church leaders, but he's using the sheep and wolf analogy. Savage wolves will come in among you and will not spare the flock, even from your own number. That is, men that Paul ordained himself and you. Men will arise and distort the truth in order to draw away disciples after themselves. Then he tells them to be on guard. In other words, when even church brethren have to worry about con men, there are leaders or wannabe leaders, either way, who want their own personal following.
Yeah, and sheep in wolves' clothing means, wolves in sheep's clothing means that they're going to look like us and sound like us and talk like us, and you're going to have to be astute to catch the little subtleties that may not be where they are. I'm not going to go, some imam's not going to convert me over, some Hindi guy is not. That this could be somebody who keeps the holy days and knows all of that, and that's how we as the sheep, or being called the sheep, can be conned over. They got to look like us.
Yeah. And a lot of people want a cult following. They are the special prophet, which of course that's Jesus Christ, but someone's actually said that blasphemous statement. But they're very, 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 very special, and they get a cult following where their word is like the Bible, and it's just. But some people want that kind of cult-like following, and Christ and Paul warns against that kind of thing. So even though, one more thing to mention too, people. I was talking to another minister. We were both somewhat victims of helping people who were in prison. We'll go through all the details. And the other minister said, you know, there's a reason why they call them convicts and con men. It helps them get paroled earlier if they can have a church working with them. And they con us because we Christians want to believe them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do try to be good finders, and we're supposed to, but at the same time, you got to look for the holes in the story,
yeah,
and be aware. You know, you also can't give what you don't have. You can only give so much and do so much.
Yeah, I found it. You can just talk to somebody, and within a very short time, pretty much figure out whether they're sincere or whether they're running a game. I remember a man called here, and he went into his story about how he was down on life and having all these problems and things, and I knew by his sound of it he was working up to wanting money or wanting something from the church, and so he kept on. And finally I told him, I said, well, I'd love to help you. I said, our church is really not set up to be able to deal with something like that. I said, however, I have these phone numbers of these organizations that will be able to help you out. Let me give you those numbers. Well, you ain't gonna help me out? I was like, well, I'm going to give you these. Well, I ain't never heard of something. Just forget it. And slammed the phone down. And I was like, you know, obviously he wasn't really wanting help. He wanted what he wanted, and didn't want any other suggestions or anything else. And I have found in my life anyway that people who are running a scam, if you just divert them off from where they're trying to go, one thing that I would recommend for anybody who wants to help somebody, if you want to help somebody who says they're collecting money for food or something, you don't give them money. Take them to the grocery store, buy them a bag of groceries. If they're truly in need, they will go with you and do that. If they're running a scam, they will not. They will not.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because there was a police department busted a guy. I forget what he was doing, but he was one of the people who stand out there with the cardboard sign and a glum look on their face. Will work for food, out of work, Christian this or what have you. And they pulled $900 out of his pocket, and they put it on the table. And they took a picture of it and they posted it on Facebook. Here's what these guys really are.
Mm-hmm.
That are doing this. It's a job to them. They don't want a real job. They want to just beg for money, and they make more money. They said, "Why should I get a real job? I'm making $900 a week sitting on the curb."
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book called Professional Panhandling. I've been thinking about getting a white bucket and writing House of David on it. Just stand on the corner.
Tax-free money, right?
You're better off writing Colonel Sanders on it, man.
Put an orange vest on and you hit me at the intersection in Orlando. All those tourists. Well,
where are we at? Have we come to the end of this?
What's coming up on 6/12? I think it's 6/12, 6/13. Okay, I was just saying next week we're going to look at Ephraim and Manasseh and David's royal line, right? And that as we're getting ready to build up to the 4th of July, the question is, are there certain blessings that have come to Ephraim and Manasseh? Well, we think that's Britain and the United States. And Joseph's, the blessings were channeled through Abraham, through Joseph, and there's also the royal line. And I just think as we build up to the 4th of July, it might be interesting to at least discuss it. I understand everybody doesn't believe it. You don't have to believe it, but I think it's an interesting topic.
And I know my dad's would love to hear about David's royal line.
Yeah. Well, some of it's
yeah.
Admittedly, we can't prove everything, but it's something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, if we have come to the end of another week, then we thank everyone for listening. We thank our new listeners that we may have had tonight. We have very wonderful, loyal fans down in Trinidad and Tobago. We want to say happy Sabbath to them, and Dan and Kay and everyone who's listening. And if I can get it to queue up, we're going to actually have our intro again. So let's give it a shot.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.
I got to do something with the video for that. That's pretty weak, just having that picture up there. He did such a good song, a good job on this song. I've got this weak little video here. So anyway, good night, everyone. Have a wonderful Sabbath, and we'll see you back here next week.
Good night.
Good night.